So I worked a double shift today at my job, and obviously nobody likes double shifts, right? You don't feel like you can get anything done at home. You're out all day, your social battery is more than likely drained by the time you're done. But today, it was a little bit different, and I'll tell you why. So typically, in between shifts, I'll get about 30 minutes to an hour where I can go home, relax, unwind from the former part of the day, let my dog out to go to the bathroom, get her some fresh food and water, and maybe get a bite to eat, and if I'm lucky, catch a few Z's. Take a snooze, pull a Rip Van Winkle, maybe start to get rid of some of the layers of bags under my eyes. Yes, I know they're blaringly obvious, and it's okay if you looked. It's okay. I did this to myself. I'm trying to fix it. I promise. Just get a hold of yourself and just pay attention to the story, okay? So, today was one of those lucky days where I was able to get a nap in. And during this time, I had a vision. A revelation, if you will. There I was, in the land of Param. The overworld, to be specific. I was going through the tall grass, searching around, not quite sure what was going to come upon me, and I stumbled upon Lake Kenepo. The Aurora Borealis shining above me in the night sky, and as I started wading into the waters and getting my tunic wet, I saw him. There before me, descending right in front of me onto the waters, was Nadrin. The man himself, flowing long beard and his mystical cloak just flying and flapping behind him as he descended in front of me. Now, I won't share all the details of our meeting, our chance meeting, our miracle, but, some things a man has to keep to himself, I'm sorry to say. But what I can tell you is, during this conversation, me and Nadrin were sitting there, and we're passing the blunt around, obviously. We're zooted off of our minds, and we ended up coming to a question that I think we need to ask ourselves, and the reason for me making this video today. Chaotic is coming back, but can it survive the modern TCG market? Let's talk about it. So kind of as a launching off point for this video, I wanted to hop back in time a little bit, pop in the passenger seat with Doc Brown and shoot through time and really take a look at where Chaotic sat at its heyday, amongst a bunch of industry giants of the time and, quite frankly, the titans that still stand before us today. Back in around the 2009-ish era, I think, is what I'm going to be using mostly as a comparison for what would be considered the peak of Chaotic. So around that time, we had other trading card games such as Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, and some of you guys might remember, we also had Naruto that was pretty prevalent as well. I would say, not to diss all the other card games, but those were the big few that Chaotic was entering into and competing against at the time. Now, being an adult, as I am today, it really interests me to look at the history of TCGs and obviously Chaotic specifically, and seeing exactly what was going on behind the scenes that we might not have known, or exactly where it stood on that pedestal. And looking at the numbers here, at least, as accurate as I can get with the sources that I have, behind Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, it was sitting at around number 3 as, the third most popular trading card game. And it obviously didn't have that level of rapport and icon status that these other trading card games have. I think I was reading in Canada, it was actually the best-selling trading card game, which is super impressive. Obviously originated from there, so it doesn't shock me. But yeah, that's kind of where it stood. And I'm no mathematician here, and I ain't the smartest tool in the shed. But looking at it here, Magic at that time had its online version of the game. There's a cool little tidbit I found. So at the time, Magic's registered players for their online platform was about 150,000 players or so, right? You want to take a guess at where Chaotic stood with its online player count and how many people were, duking it out in the drones with their flurries of fists and shooting their Armageddons everywhere? You want to take a guess? You done? Yeah, I knew you weren't even close. You're way too low. 1.25 million registered users. Wow. Now you're probably asking yourself, why did I bring this up specifically, the online version, right? It leads into the next part of what I'm wanting to get across is it's what made Chaotic unique. Its online version is what made it unique. When you look at Chaotic, it doesn't have Pikachu, it doesn't have Charizard, right? It doesn't have Dark Magician or Blue Eyes, but what it did have is the ability to take what you had physically and exactly transport it over to an online collection. And that was the niche that Chaotic set itself in. I almost want to compare it to it, like Tron, for example, the original movie Tron. You look at that; it was made way too early. Just it was way ahead of its time, and the technology showed. I'd say for Chaotic, it might. I'm not saying this is exactly the same scenario, but I'd almost say it's in that same boat of it was way ahead of its time. And I personally think it pulled it off really well for what technology we had at the time. But that is what made it unique. You had the exact same cards in your exact collection in the online version. So you really felt that connection to what you owned and what you were playing with. And I do think Chaotic also, to give it credit, it did build a good world. It had good world building. In Pokemon, you have the different regions. Yu-Gi-Oh, you have, I'd say the characters and the relationships between them are a huge factor in that, and the monsters and all that. But Chaotic, it really built almost, I want to say, a Dungeons and Dragons like type world where you're living in it, they're constantly building on it, and the card game is evolving around us to fit the story and narrative that we were experiencing at the time. Now, that's all to say, and kind of get to the final conclusion that I have of, I think Chaotic had so much more potential than it did, and obviously we lost it way too soon, just due to random business practices and poor decision making, people arguing over whatever have you. And it really sucks that we did lose it, because I feel like if it kept going, we might still have it today, and it would still be, a powerhouse. Who knows? It might be more popular than a Yu-Gi-Oh or a Pokemon. But that leads us into our next segment, if you will, and really again asking the question, how can it and what will it look like in the modern TCG market, right? So if we look at things now, Pokemon is still massive. Yu-Gi-Oh has decades of brand recognition. Magic is still the veteran, hobby store powerhouse, and newer games even like One Piece, Lorcana, Star Wars, Riftbound, they've all made their way into the fray, and it's a much more saturated market. You have more people doing indie card games, and those are picking up traction. So Chaotic is definitely entering into a space where I feel like it's going to have a bit of a rough time really fitting into there, and I think a huge thing that it needs to do is, lead with what made Chaotic special, right? Don't just market it as another nostalgia TCG. The hook should be, and I think still should be, physical cards that become digital cards, right? It's quite honestly still, in my opinion, still Chaotic's best selling point, right? I think another thing we need to look at is it needs to make the app and online experience smooth at launch, If scanning cards, building decks, and playing online are clunky, people lose that level of trust really fast. The online side can't feel like a bonus feature. It has to feel like the heart of the game, right? So kind of a few things to kind of wrap up the video into one, nice little bow here is a few different things that I can think of at the top of my head, at least. Maybe you guys have some thoughts of what Chaotic really needs to do, and I think prioritize first and foremost to really launch into this new generation and make itself known and really carve that niche for itself, right? So I think first and foremost, if you look at all these other card games, we see competitive play. I think the organized play really needs to be real, not just like, we have tournaments sometimes and we'll stream some big events, occasionally. No, I think organized play is such a huge part of a lot of card games, right? We need stores to hop on board, weekly events, promos, clear judge rules, documents, and stuff like that. And something I'm seeing more and more of today, having played some Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, is, a clear way to find those events. Because from what I remember back in the day, I wasn't able to find events. I was like, oh, I guess I'll go play with, my buddy Isaac down the street for the 5th time this week, right? I never knew where to find these events. So being open, clear, and transparent about how we can get connected, how we can further our further our understanding, if you will, of how we can get into this competitive field, I think will be a very, very, very helpful tool for the relaunch. And then looking at the next point, I think we also need to help new players get engaged as well, right? We need clear starter decks, clear rules, clean and simple onboarding stuff. It sounds business-like, but at the end of the day, it is a business. And, you have to sometimes crunch the numbers and just look, guys, to make this work, we're going to have to do A, B. It's just how it is, right? So catering to the new audience and catering to the old audience in such a way that it doesn't feel too simple, but it doesn't feel too hard. And I think that's where a lot of card games like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Really succeed. It's a simple onboarding process. And, well, Yu-Gi-Oh! I could argue. I feel like I read War and Peace every time I read a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card now, but we'll use Pokemon as an example. It's really easy to get into and understand within your first few games, right? And I feel like if Chaotic can nail that down, it'll be in a very good spot. Now, the last couple of points that I have here are quite simple on the surface, but when you really dig deep, they actually have huge impact and huge significance on the the bigger picture, so to speak. We really need to make the launch of the game not too complicated, in my opinion. This might offend you guys, and you guys might get upset at me, and start knocking on my door, breaking down my door, swatting me, coming at me with torches and pitchforks, but it's just the reality. We need to not make the launch too complicated. And what do I mean by that? I think we just need a clean launch, one set, couple of starter decks, and maybe some booster packs and a couple things, but don't release a million different products to start. Give us the identity that Chaotic wants to build and just start with that. That's the one of those first points. The next one, I think and it's a trap. It's a trap that a lot of card games are falling into, is building off of the collector hype rather than the player hype. You see so many serialized cards now. 1 of 100, 1 of 69, 1 of 67. But Chaotic needs to stay away from that. Because once you start building a collector brand, that's when prices start going up. Scalpers start getting away with crap they shouldn't get away with. And you really start to take the focus away from the organized play, which, again, going back to that and kind of elevating that, competitive play and the players enjoying what you have is going to make or break the game. Again, this is all my personal opinion. I'd love to know what you guys think, but yeah, just don't cater it to the collectors. You can cater it to both, have, a couple special cards and secret rares, but again, that affects the accessibility of the game and overall will start to form a pretty big hole, and you don't want to fall into that and not be able to get yourself back out of it. And then I think just lastly, right, be transparent with the community, right? Be clear, because I feel like with Chaotic before, we didn't really get a good picture of a lot of stuff that I feel like we should have, right? Release dates, when events are happening, jumping back to the, where can I find events, and card legality and stuff like that. I think a ban list is just another simple thing that we can start introducing to make sure that the game is healthy and stays competitive, right? Just transparency, transparency, transparency. Your community loves this game. We want it to succeed. We want it to last for years to come. And I feel like that is the key ingredient here to making this, this recipe succeed in the long run. So just highlight the transparency, make sure the communication's there, because your community so badly wants, I badly want to make sure that I can work as close as possible. I might not have a super deep impact. Who knows, where I'll go with that. But I would love to be as, balls deep as I can with it and make it succeed. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video. It was just super awesome, not being able to see all this stuff beforehand and, being able to kind of dive deeper into the numbers and just seeing exactly how good and how successful Chaotic was back in the day. And it was really honestly encouraging for the relaunch for me, and kind of getting a perspective and, ask myself, what does it need to replicate, change, or do to make it in this, honestly quite a lot more flooded market of TCGs that we have today? Can it make it back up to that pedestal status that it had up there with Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, so on and so forth? Anyways, that's just an old man's thoughts, an old man's opinions. And Am I just blowing smoke? Is it smoke and mirrors? Who knows? It very well could be. Me and Nadrin did hotbox his car a few times. It's weird. He drives a Fiat. Not quite what I was expecting, but anyway. Yep, let me know what you guys think down below. You guys were super receptive in the last video. A lot of good feedback, a lot of good comments. So love to hear from you guys. If you have any, topics you'd like me to cover regarding Chaotic or other things, I'd love to go over those as well. Let me know. And if you have any news that I might not have heard and you'd like me to talk about it and get my thoughts on it, make sure you guys point it out to me as well. And as everyone always says, make sure to like, comment, subscribe on the video, share it with your friends, your grandma sitting in the nursing home. Lord bless her soul. And yeah, anyway, it's always been a pleasure with you guys. You guys are super awesome. Love y'all. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.